I'm going to start this out by saying I'm amazed at the, I'm going to use the word resonance between the three talks that we've already had, and everybody's looking at the same thing, and they're looking at it through their own lens and their own experience, and I find that gratifying, and I think there's a very good reason for that, and I hope I can help pull some of those threads together this morning. The title, which I did not choose, "The Way Forward from the Present Crisis," is one that I briefly considered rebelling against, and then decided that I would not do that. But given this title, I should have a plan. The way forward from the present crisis, right? I should have a plan for us to get together, maybe. Since Dublin in 2018, we've been making progress. We've discovered problems. I should have a plan. I should have a map. I should have a structure, something that we can all live with, live within. I don't have a plan. I should have a plan for how we save Western civilization based on what we've been talking about the last couple of days. The things that we're all worried about have gotten worse, unimaginably worse, and accelerated unimaginably since 2020, when we were here last. It's not that long ago, but it seems like a decade, culturally speaking. I don't have a plan. I do have a favorite science fiction series called Firefly. The heroes of Firefly are the crew of a small spacecraft called Serenity, and they're running a shipping business. Sometimes it's even legal. They're trying to stay one step ahead of a totalitarian government that has made everything illegal in an unsuccessful attempt to build a utopia. The feds conduct a mass medical experiment on a planet called Miranda, and it kills or injures millions of people, and then they cover it up. The crew of Serenity find out the truth, so they have a choice to make. In the words of Captain Malcolm Reynolds, somebody needs to speak for these people. You all got on this boat for different reasons, but now we've all come to the same place. So I'm asking more of you than I have before. Maybe all. As sure as I know anything, I know this, they will try again. They will swing back to the belief that they can make people better. And I do not hold to that. So no more running. I aim to misbehave. Well, like all systems built on lies, the federal government in the 26th century will do anything to prohibit those who see the truth from asking questions out loud. The crew of Serenity end up on the run and being hunted down. A desperate Captain Mal confides in one of his crew members, Shepherd Book, who in a science fiction rarity is a Christian clergyman. Captain Mal tells Shepherd Book, "I don't have a plan." Shepherd Book says, "Well, why'd you do this?" He said, "I don't know." He said, I don't know why I didn't just avoid all this trouble." Shepherd Book says, "It's not your way, Mal." And Mal says, "I've got a way? Is that better than a plan?" I don't have a plan. Why am I here then? I'm here to tell you, you have a way. Now don't get me wrong, plans can be a good thing. Plans, maps, structures, they're great as long as they work solving the problems you're actually trying to solve in the situation you are actually in. Each of us are actually the privileged heirs to some pretty good plans. Some of those plans go back centuries. They worked for a long time. They kept us moving forward, they kept us growing. They were passed down to the next generation. Others could continue making the plan work. So obviously we just need to continue those plans, right? Well, plans are useful until they're not. There are centuries in which nothing happens. And then there are years in which centuries happen. One day we all woke up executing the plan that we inherited and always worked, and suddenly it didn't. The plan's not working, but we're somehow stuck with it. It's been around for a while. Everything is built around it. It is unquestioned and unquestionable. All we know is living within that plan. And because of that, and more importantly, all we know is living within a plan. So we decide we just need another plan. We're good at plans. So we apply our experience living in the last plan to making a new plan. But here's the problem with that. Our experience tells us to do exactly what hasn't been working since things changed. Einstein is credited with saying that we cannot solve our problems at the same level of thinking that created them. That doesn't just mean we need new thoughts. It means we have to move from the level of superficially accepting how we do things to the root level of understanding why we do them. We have to distinguish between immovable first principles and the ways that we adapt them variously. It means moving from where we are to a different stage in the process of growth. That stage comes after the stage where our plans are settled. It comes before our plans are settled again. Let's call it the in-between time. Let's call it the in-between time. During the in-between time, we have to operate without a plan until we figure a new one out. So what do you do in the in-between time? Well, you can keep the old plan no matter what. You can isolate yourself. You can hope that the world around you will eventually figure out how to go back to the way it was when your old plan worked. That's preservation. It's not all bad. There's another option. If our plan is no longer working in our environment, we can adapt ourselves to that environment. We can look at how other people are doing things. We can change, we can follow their plan, even to the extent of abandoning our immovable first principles. That's called apostasy, as in apostasis, to go stand somewhere else. We can just go stand somewhere else instead of where we are. Now you might think those options are polar opposites, and I think we treat those options as polar opposites, but I'm here to tell you, from a planning perspective, they're exactly the same. Why? Both of these options are just borrowing someone else's plan. We can continue to borrow someone else's plan for the past. Or we can borrow someone else's plan from the present. In both cases, we don't have to make our own. Daniel, can you bring me some water, please? Thank you. We can avoid the pain, the perplexity, the hard thinking, the trial, the error necessary to find our way through to a different way of doing things. But in the in-between time, that's actually exactly what we need to be doing. When we don't have a plan, we must have a way. A way lets us move forward, step by step. It lets us do so even without knowing exactly where we're going. A way lets us move forward even when we're not sure where we want to go. A way replaces certain inaction with uncertain action. A way is a road. Hodos in the Greek, as in exodos. A way out. It's about the disciplines of motion at a very tactical level. Wake up, load the tent, pick a direction, walk, keep your head on a swivel, stay hydrated, find food, make camp, play with the kids, kiss your wife, go to bed, wake up, repeat. When you don't know where you are going, or even where you want to go. It's about asking, who do we need to be to manifest the vision? What do we do to become more like those people? It's about asking ourselves to change instead of reality or other people or even God to change. It's about refusing to hold progress hostage to demand perfect knowledge of where we are going. But isn't moving forward without a plan a bad idea? Here's the good news. There is a plan. It's just not ours. The way has a plan. The way has a plan that causes problems for other plans. You see, the way actually has a kingdom. And that kingdom has a plan to dissolve the plans of other kingdoms. That plan was revealed 2,600 years ago in a dream dreamed by the king of Babylon and interpreted by a Jewish exile. Each successive kingdom annihilated in turn: Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, Roman, and then a world full of fragmented kingdoms following the Roman Empire that couldn't hold together. This was not just a safe bet on the part of the prophet that things would fall apart on their own. The statue is pulverized by a stone that grows to fill the earth. A final kingdom that shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Back in 2023, the kingdoms of iron and clay are joining their predecessors in the indignity of having their plans dissolved by the way. That's where we are. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God? St. Peter again, right? I agree. We need to be reading St. Peter now. He's not just pointing to a final stoic conflagration at the end of time that dissolves everything in fire. He knows the iron legs of Rome are about to break. And the guy nicknamed the Rock knows what is coming in its place. So that means, since we're in the eternal kingdom, that what we build is going to last forever, right? Wrong. That's not how growth works. Growth requires change through phases and circumstances. We should not confuse our plans, maps, and structures with the eternal kingdom itself. The permanent kingdom grows through impermanent phases. History emphasizes this impermanence dramatically. I cannot recommend enough that you read Philip Jenkins' The Lost History of Christianity to see just how often major, successful Christian movements and their associated structures have seemingly served their intended purpose and gone away. Even very big and very old things in the eternal kingdom have gone away. And many people think today that Christianity is a European phenomenon that eventually spread around the world. The reality is, Christianity wasn't built here first, and it may not have even been built here best. After massive structures, literally on an arc from Tokyo through the Levant and down to Cape Town, disappeared and fell. Europe became the only remaining option. That's history. Old and big things may last to the end, but they may not. In Washington, D.C., the National Archives building has an engraving on the pediment. It says, "This building holds in trust the records of our national life and symbolizes our faith in the permanency of our national institutions." When you read that as a historian, you think, what an embarrassing thing to have in the ruins. I mean, really. And I'm glad it's there because somebody in the future will be able to look at that and say, morons. I hope we don't do that. I hope we don't think that way about ourselves. Do we have faith in the permanency of our ecclesiastical institutions? Might the final king decide that our current institutions should change for inscrutable reasons that he feels no obligation to share with us? Ironically, there was a time when the plans, maps, and structures that we are holding on to didn't exist. Someone had to let go of their plans to build the ones that we inherited and are having trouble letting go of. That's how all growth works. That is because the way grows new things from the chaos that results from his own dissolving of the plans of the kingdoms of the world. G.K. Chesterton said that the Christian church has reanimated the corpse of the Roman Empire 8 times. And he was writing that in 1930. Chaos is the perfect environment for new growth. Imagine yourself on a melting island of solid rock in a growing lake of magma, lava from a volcano. Shouldn't be too hard. It's a great analogy for our recent experience. There's a lot of heat. Plans, maps, structures are disappearing. Our favorite hammer that makes everything look like a nail just melted. Magma is a place of chaos and disorder, but only magma can make an amethyst. That place of hot, uncontrollable chaos contains everything necessary to make one. After the meltdown, the lava eventually cools and the new crystal structure begins to form. Well, what happens in the in-between time? Between the time that everything melts and the time you've got an amethyst. That process is called nucleation. Now, we used to think it looked like this. There's an atom out there by itself, it meets another atom and they join. And then another atom comes, and another atom, and another atom, and they all join together according to a predetermined plan that forms an amethyst. Perfect sense. Also perfectly wrong. Last year, for the first time in human history, we got to see what actually happens in the in-between time of crystal formation. There's a lab at Berkeley called the Molecular Foundry. It's developed a way to capture moving images at the atomic level at frame rates more than 100 times faster than previous methods. We can finally make movies of atoms, okay? So in 2021, researchers were able to make movies of molten gold as it cooled. What they saw was actually shocking. Gold atoms quickly and repeatedly forming very complex but temporary structures, falling back apart, reforming, forming, reforming, and every time a different structure. That should sound familiar. It is an unspeakably powerful creative process, but it is not simple. Each temporary pattern of atoms releases huge amounts of energy. It can destroy the other patterns, but the purpose is creative. It's to find a pattern that will lead to the emergence of a new, stable structure, whether it's a gold bar or an amethyst geode. Sounds messy. It almost sounds like whatever is in charge of that process doesn't know what it's doing. Like it's making mistakes. Like it's wasting important time and resources on doing things the wrong way on the way to doing them the right way. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. Whatever vigorous prodigy is running this circus of impossibly intricate mathematics and stupendous dynamism and power is doing something different. It's isolating a pattern. That pattern is the only pattern that can tune the energy in such a way as to transition the exact recipe of chaos, unique in the history of the cosmos, into an exact geode, absolutely unique in the history of the cosmos. It is not only the most efficient way to build an amethyst, it is the only way to build an amethyst. But it's not just amethysts. These phases of chaos, reconfiguration, settling into a new structure, it's built into everything in the world. It's the way the Logos does it. Inanimate objects and living things, including us. The Logos is actually particularly interested in our little patch of chaos. Why? Because the divine Logos did something unimaginable, as Bishop Attar reminded us. He became human. And now he speaks of his human body as somehow including us. How much more will the energetic experimentation, the formation, the reformation of that body, in the way that the plans, maps, and structures of the church are manifested, be precious to him? Are you not worth more than many amethysts? We have something infinitely better than a plan. We have a way. The way has a plan. And the way has the power to carry out the plan. Our faith must be in the intricate, stupendous power of the Creator of the new creation, and not in the permanence of our ecclesiastical institutions. There, I said it. So, a way forward from the present crisis. Since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be? How do we move forward after the meltdown and in the in-between time? How do we find not just a way forward, but a way forward from the present crisis? Well, the new way of doing things must be a road from the exact form of chaos that we are in to a new stable structure that works in that same environment. I define today's chaos, and I think based on the previous papers today, I think there's agreement on this, as a global ascendance of Gnostic mass movements. I'm not here to trace the history of that. We can talk about it later. There's a there. But Gnostic ideas greatly influenced many so-called Enlightenment thinkers. This eventually metastasized into the Gnostic mass movements, first in the form of Marxism and Nazism, now in the form of cultural Marxism and the woke movement. The appearance and the sweeping victory of these movements is historically breathtaking, even on the scale of millennia. There is no major institution, historic churches included, that has not essentially been taken over at this point. Fortunately, ancient Gnosticism, more than anything else, sharpened Christianity into its classical form. If Christianity can be defined as not something else, that something else is Gnosticism. That's why St. John calls it the spirit of Antichrist, right? Unfortunately, our legacy plans were formed during a time of Christian ascendance. That means we define ourselves primarily as not another flavor of Christianity, because we were all fighting each other. If you are still executing a plan to not be another type of Christianity, instead of a plan to not be antichristic Gnosticism, you need a new plan, and you need it quick. Because they're not going slowly. Now, your plan might still work. You might succeed in leading Christians from their not so good jurisdictions into your obviously better jurisdiction, right? I mean, you may even succeed in consolidating whatever's left of Christianity into your camp over the next few decades. That could happen. But if we do not find a way to answer the challenge of a globally ascendant, anti-Christic Gnosticism, we will have only succeeded in beating out the other gangs in the city to control the inner citadel while the Romans are patiently waiting outside for Jerusalem to fall. We need another way. Outside the aging walls that we built to protect us from each other. There's a Gnostic empire that we must conquer, and there are billions of captives we must free. We need another plan. So let's start with what we are not, or at least what we shouldn't be. Gnostics, of both a Marxist and Nazi and woke and cultural Marxist variety, believe that the order of being itself is pathological and was made that way, to quote Lady Gaga, was made that way by design. It is therefore, the order of being that is, hostile to mankind. Mankind should return the favor and be hostile to the order of being. Escape is by becoming woke, waking up, if you like. That is raising consciousness, as Bishop Roll was talking about in Hegel, raising your consciousness, which will lead to a coming utopia. The woke will help by tearing down the hierarchical structures they have inherited, that have been imposed on us by the order of being and by those old people back there. They dismantle institutions, cultural systems of thought, literature, music, art, individuals, families, societies, and nations. They're dismantling our very bodies right now in surgical theaters across the world. In their place, they attempt to build a system in defiance of the order of being to force it to give way to a new utopia. While masquerading as enlightenment or even as science, today's Gnosticism is really more like alchemy or even magic. And I mean magic in the classical sense of the word. But the spell doesn't work. These systems tend to not work very well. By which I mean they fail visibly and spectacularly and lead to hell on earth. The deep scars left by the Gnostic mass movements of the 20th century are empirically obvious. They do not require theological or philosophical interpretation to prove that they are failures or to argue that whatever impulse they proceeded from is something to be avoided at all costs. Because their ideas are not true, Gnostics use force to silence questioning. Because their ideas don't work, they use force to keep them going anyway. Those who are determined to not live within their system or believe what they believe must be attacked. If you think it's not going to come to your house, you're wrong. The Gnostic way, then, is resisting the order of being, tearing down the structures of civilization, heavy-handed central planning, and warfare against those who do not submit, and especially against the ideologically impure within their own ranks. We have a different way, don't we? Instead of believing the cosmos is flawed by design and hostile to humans, we believe that the order of being was created good and is in its very design aimed toward the flourishing of life, including human life. Instead of believing that mankind's main problem is ignorance and that salvation is found in waking up to a world of alienation, hatred, and warfare, we believe that mankind's problem is misalignment with the order of being, and that realigning with that order of being in the divine Logos is the way to the restoration of humans, the world, and the cosmos. Instead of mindless destruction of the hierarchies of nature and society, we believe in smart preservation and repairing what is broken so that it functions the way it was intended to. Instead of insisting that what we think and what we build must succeed regardless of the order of being, we respect the order of being and seek to build things that work in cooperation with it. We do not cast spells to change the direction of the wind. We learn to adjust our sails. We therefore do not rely on heavy-handed planning and control, but instead we rely on truth to vindicate itself and cooperation with reality to produce empirically undeniable results. We don't need to force others to conform. We invite them and we integrate them into a good thing when we have it. The Gnosticism that we know from history books is no longer in the history books. It's now become a living global reality. It has spawned mass movements that were unimaginable in the 2nd century. It has infiltrated and taken command of most of the power structures in the world and most of the legacy structures of the church. If you're not making plans using that context as your reality, it is of the utmost importance that you immediately adjust. Our way forward must now be an exodus from a global Gnostic empire. Best news I have to offer you today is this. Our way is perfectly designed to do that. Perfectly. The difficult reality I must acquaint you with is that we ourselves are drawn, like everyone else, toward taking the Gnostic way instead. That's why it's a Christian heresy. The job of finding a way forward from the present crisis and finding a way different than the Gnostic way is the same job. So let's work through that. We don't go to war with reality, do we? Our way is to lean into reality and adjust to it. Moving forward during the in-between time is an ongoing, difficult encounter with the order of being and the logos that governs it. Sometimes, when our plans meet that reality, they don't work. That's not a lot of fun. Maybe we should just proceed by faith, knowing that since we're doing the right thing, we can just trust God with the results. God expects us to be faithful, not successful, right? But what if we're just doing it wrong? Is that possible? Certainly possible in my case. Maybe the way I see things this way is because I've had so many plans that didn't work. Golden Boy left the building a long time ago. Are we faithfully persisting despite a lack of results? Or are we stubbornly insisting in the face of disaster? What if we're out of line with the order of being? What if we're out of line with a new plan that the Logos has that we're not in line with? What if it's not the universe? What if it's not the people around us? What if it's not God? What if it's us? It's possible, right? Is our faith in God's power to make a way? Or is our faith in our plans and the ability of our plans to plow through reality like magic? Exactly like magic. We do not resort to totalitarian methods of control to force everybody to do it our way or else. Do we? We loosen our grip on our plans. No matter how old and venerable those plans are, and no matter how deeply and sincerely held they are, we hold them a little more lightly than the Gnostics do, right? If the divine Logos is dissolving the plans of entire kingdoms, even the plans of the church, we should hold our plans a little less tightly. We might even need to let go of the life we had planned to make room for the life that He has planned for us. Maybe. Unlike Gnostics, we don't insist on controlling reality. And we don't insist, as we were speaking about the other day, or last night, we don't insist on shrinking uncontrollable reality into something small enough that we can control. Do we? There's a proper place for control. But sometimes we try to build systems that are so big and so perfect, to quote someone, that men are no longer required to be good. We don't need a way. We've got a plan. Right? The ground of being, the origin of being, the order of being, all of these things are ultimately beyond our grasp. Because of that, we want to shrink reality to fit what we think we can understand and what we think we can control. So if it doesn't fit our plans, just pretend it doesn't exist. If you can't figure out how to solve the problem, stick to more familiar territories. If people aren't responding, ignore them. If the rest of the church doesn't sing off the exact same sheet of music we do, just pretend they don't exist. They'll go away. We can keep our awareness only on what we think that we understand and control. It's so soothing to the rational mind. Rationalists don't want to contend with what exceeds the limits of their reason. Love the quote at the end, Father John, about how you don't want to see beauty when you're a rationalist, because it just melts everything, right? It's outside of your control. It's outside of your understanding. Gnostics believe that the way out is what they already know. They believe that the way out is just coming from them. Everything and everyone outside of that limited sphere of knowledge is an enemy to be excluded and attacked. They try to shrink the entire cosmos into a tiny safe space. We don't do that. Do we? I want you to see we can outmaneuver and outbuild these incredibly big, incredibly funded, and incredibly violent at times Gnostic mass movements. We have a strategic advantage in our way that is very big. That is rooted in our ability to move ahead without a complete plan. I know that might seem like a bad idea, but I'm telling you, that is your strategic advantage here. It better not be media dominance. It better not be money. I'm telling you, that's what your advantage is. Do you think the early church had control of the levers of society? No. It's rooted in our ability to move ahead without a complete plan. The Logos has a plan for us and the whole cosmos. We are therefore free to proceed into the unknowable, to proceed into the uncontrollable. It lets us seize the initiative. It lets us create continuous momentum, and continuous momentum is what builds into exponential growth. Do you want to build something? Move. Move. Any direction. Move. And then move more. And then move more. Our enemy is the paralysis of overanalysis. Okay? We need to move. And we need to keep moving. We need to seize the initiative. I cannot emphasize how powerful an advantage this is going to be as we mount our challenge to these Gnostic mass movements. Unlike the woke, we are not stuck in our own heads. We are not ideologically bound to our ideas to the extent that we cannot be open to another way. Are we? Humans are actually made, naturally, to constantly consider alternative courses of action. We all do it all the time. Our minds are constantly creating imaginary avatars of what we could be in the future. Astronomer Jay, gone, right? Scientist Jay, only as a hobby. Rock star Jay, didn't happen. All of those things were avatars, right? Early on. Then you have to pick. It's actually a process amazingly similar to the trying out of different patterns to form a crystal structure in nucleation. All of them are there, but you're going to pick one and go with it. Unlike the Logos, who sorts these options out perfectly, our avatar builder is in dysfunction. A couple of ways it can go wrong. People and groups who feel depressed and trapped lack the ability to imagine another way of doing things. They lack the ability to get motivated to try something else. That's dangerous because they stop growing and adapting and changing, and the world around you doesn't. That's not living. That's not life. On the other hand, people who are manic find every possible self and every possible future equally attractive and equally worth pursuing. You ever been around anybody like that? That's dangerous. Because some of those plans are stupid, and some of them are dangerous. The middle point is about choosing one of those possible ways forward and acting on it. That requires balance, and it requires discernment. It requires us to be willing to put all of our requirements, everything that we must have, in the interrogation room. It's hard to do. It's hard to do, but I'm telling you, we have to do this now. No choice. If every requirement that we have is an absolute, we will have no energy left to put into developing new ways of doing things. The only way to a new way is constantly questioning our requirements. No requirement is exempt, especially the ones that everybody accepts, because the chances are that nobody's taken a hard look at those recently. For each requirement, we should ask, who is the source of this requirement? Not a faceless group, not a vague ideal, not a movement, not history, not even the church, okay? Because unlike Gnostics, our duty is to persons, not to collectives, not to ideals. Our duty is to persons. Who's the source of the requirement? Now, if in every single case, if I ask you about all the things that you require, if in every single case your answer reflexively is, well, God, of course, with no exception, you might be confusing him with somebody else. If even the Apostle Paul sometimes said, I, not the Lord, in talking about his requirements in Scripture, we probably need to be able to do that. Now, if God requires it, then fine, but if not, then who? For each requirement, we should ask, is this requirement necessary to solve a current problem that we're facing right now? Or is it just a requirement in search of a problem? Is it my favorite hammer in search of a nail? Is it the thing that I feel like I can contribute? Lord, have I been guilty of this? The thing that I feel that I can contribute, so therefore everybody needs to, sit down and let me do it. Right? Is it something that we actually need to solve a problem we're facing right now? Is it a problem from the future that we don't actually have yet, that we're hoping we'll have someday once we get to a certain scale? I mean, God grant that we have some of the problems that our big, complicated solutions are designed to solve. God grant there be enough of us that it's worth having that much organizational structure, right? That would be wonderful. But do we need it all now? in this situation, for this Exodus? Do we need to have that on our back as we're hiking through the wilderness? Can it wait until that problem actually arises? Can the requirement be deleted entirely? Would getting rid of it for a while let us see better? Did we really need it? Let the problem that made it develop arise again and say, that's why we were doing that. Okay, well now we know how to do that better. Sometimes you have to just delete it. That said, unlike the Gnostics, we do not engage in the mindless destruction of hierarchies and traditional institutions. The impulse to mindlessly unravel the inheritance of the past has swept even into Christian groups that claim fidelity to the gospel. Even people that consider themselves Orthodox. We do need to question legacy structures, but we use mindful preservation, not mindless destruction. We have an incredible toolkit from the past. It is an advantage. It is a source of credibility. As the Gnostics tear everything down, they're eventually going to find out that they needed calculators. That they needed the polio vaccine. They're going to find out that there were actually good things that Western civilization produced that they actually needed, and destroying it just because a racist from the past made it is not always the best idea. It is a mindless destruction that's happening now. They might find that logic is really helpful, that it helps you keep you from getting hit by a bus when you walk across the street, right? Logic, you might find that some of the things they're throwing away are actually useful. We are preserving those tools, but we are not just a preservation movement, okay? We are preserving those tools. But having those tools does not make us conservatives. Now, being unwilling to change makes us conservatives, if we're unwilling to change. But having those tools, as Marx learned, because he was a classicist, as Marx learned, having the tools of the past and being willing to deploy them in a new way is the best way to be a social radical. And that's what we are now. You might not be comfortable with that, but that's what you are. And if you don't believe it, let's go out into the square over there and start saying some of the stuff that we're saying in here. You'll find out real quick whether you're a social radical or not. You are not, you're preserving the status quo. Believe me. So, unlike Gnostics, we build what works, don't we? We don't expect a new utopia to emerge just because we tear down everything that came before us, which is what they expect. It's what Engels predicted. They just think they have to tear it down. They were never super concerned about what they built. It never worked, ever. Remember the bread lines? Remember the wall that they had to build to keep people in? Remember? It didn't work. And they knew it didn't work. As we build, we align with the order of being as governed by the Logos. We submit our minds and our wills to the written Word of God, which proceeds from the same exact mind that infuses the cosmos around us with information and creative energy. The exact same mind that is going to make us into the next thing that we need to be. It makes it a lot more likely that what we build is going to work. Gnostic mass movements set up huge experiments in intentional defiance against the innate hierarchies of value, social structures, and even biology. What could possibly go wrong? True science respects the order of being. Experiments are about coming to the stuff of reality, and I speak this as someone who was trained in the applied sciences and worked in the applied sciences for years, okay? Experiments are about coming to the stuff of reality in humility and building things that resonate with that reality instead of trying to magically change reality. Let me tell you, I did a lot of magical thinking as an engineer. It doesn't work. Reality is going to tell you what's going to work. Building networks of people who trust each other and work together. Very difficult for Gnostics. I don't know if you know that or not. I mean, because they do such a good job at portraying the image of a mass movement and the rhetoric of a mass movement and the sort of high school everybody's doing it and you're not, so you're not cool kind of thing, and the structure of a collective, that it kind of seems like everybody's doing it. They're actually terrible at working together. It's a fact. I spend a lot of time listening to Marxists now. Early Marxists spent way more time fighting each other than they did fighting the bourgeoisie or the capitalists. Way more time fighting each other. Vladimir Lenin called this dogmatic inability to organize infantile disorder, because he recognized how him and his younger crowd didn't work with anybody. They were so dogmatic. They were so pure in their ideology that anybody that slipped off one iota from communist doctrine, they were just shunned and put out. So they found themselves very lonely and unable to put together anything that really was going to do anything, right? So he called it infantile disorder when new Marxist movements were in that phase. Now today's older Marxists, if you listen to them, these are guys getting into their 70s, their 80s. They're looking at the woke today, and they're saying, infantile disorder. These people can't work together. I mean, we've been organizing labor unions our entire lives, and these effete, woke, stuck-up college students won't even talk to a blue-collar person. How are they expecting? This is why the labor unions are actually going conservative sometimes. They won't even talk to them. How are they going to organize? So they see this weakness. They see this happening. You need to see a vulnerability on the dragon here. You need to understand that. You need to understand that. You need to see a strength that you have that you can put against that vulnerability. You can see that your way is a way to stop this. It's an advantage. They're so busy battling each other for ideological purity that they can't work together. But we're not that way, are we? Are we? I have to admit that when I heard Marxists discussing these problems among themselves, I found myself feeling oddly at home. I wanted to share my own stories. Yeah, they won't even talk to us because of this thing that just, viewed from Mars or even from anywhere else in our country, we're exactly the same, and they won't even pick up the phone and talk to me now because I've got this little thing that I do that's different than what they do. That is not a good thing. That is not a good thing. When I feel kinship with the Marxist movements that are built on hatred and ideological intolerance, that are built on being at war with other human beings, and therefore have problems working with each other. The coming generation will be led out of the current cultural chaos by those who can effectively build networks of trust that work together. If that's not going to be us, it won't be us that lead it. But if it is us, it will be us that leads it. I'll state that categorically. Will it be us? Why don't we just try something? See if it works. And then if it doesn't, try something else. Why don't we give ourselves 5 mistakes? Let's make 5 mistakes. And you know, that means if something succeeds, then that's not one of our mistakes, right? We'll go until we've made 5 mistakes, then we'll all get back together and we'll say, we made 5 mistakes, we have to quit. But we can make 5 mistakes, that's okay. Let's give ourselves 5 mistakes worth of running time. To knock one domino into another domino, into another domino, into another domino, into another domino, and get some momentum going on what's going to change the world. Why don't we just try that? Well, one of the reasons is that we're in a hurry to get to structure. We want to skip over the trial and the error. We want to skip over the in-between time, so that unlike every other living thing in the universe, and unlike the amethysts, and unlike gold bars, but just like the woke, we don't have to contend with figuring out a new way, because we already know it. Gall's law is a principle of design. It says complex structures that work always grow from simple structures that work. Complex, let's use the word systems. Complex systems that work always grow from simple systems that work. The inverse proposition of Gall's law is complex systems designed from the top down, from scratch, never work and cannot be made to work and can only be scrapped and replaced with simple systems that work. A nice phrase for this is, don't build walls in the desert. You don't need them there. You build what you need to solve the problems you have now. But there are so many problems that we could solve. How can we possibly choose just one? How do you prioritize when the world is on fire? How do you prioritize when everything, I mean, you know, we have these conversations and we go from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, all of which are intractable, all of which seem incurable, all of which seem like they're getting worse and worse, and all of which make us feel helpless. What do we do first? How can we possibly do that? How can we meet this with just one thing? Don't we need to build this to counter that? How could we just find one thing? It's not an unusual problem. It's a normal problem. We actually all have this problem. In environments where that problem is highly focused, is a good place to learn. My brother Nick was a Special Forces team member under Marine Special Operations Command. They believe in plans. Okay? These people believe in plans. They will practice for 4 solid months. Over and over and over and over and over and over. To do a thing that will take 1 hour when they get there. Literally. Months. They believe in plans. But they also know that no matter how much they plan, they will meet with the unexpected. They know that they will have to execute the plan in circumstances they did not plan for. They know, like Eisenhower said, planning is everything, plans are useless. Planning requires you to understand why you do what you do. It requires you to understand what is fixed and immovable and what can change. And planning for different scenarios lets you imagine those different avatars for the future. One of the big advantages of imagining those avatars from the future is that you can kill them off in your own mind and save somebody else the trouble of doing it for you later on. They are trained to quickly do 3 things. Look around. Assess the situation. Things have fallen apart. The plan's not working. Something that you did not plan for is happening, and the mission clock is ticking. Look around, quickly assess the situation. Quickly choose one problem to solve as best you can. Solve that problem quickly, as best you can. Solve it. Repeat. That's how the most high-performing people in the highest stress situations with the maximum amount of chaos do their jobs. Every day. I think that's a really good paradigm for where we are right now. The benefit of that approach is not that it solves problems. The benefit of that approach is that it relieves you of the burden of solving all of the problems that can't be solved right now, so that you can actually solve one problem, and in solving that one problem, you can create forward momentum, and in the military, and in life, and in the church, and everywhere else, forward momentum changes the game, and forward momentum wins the game. And standing still, frozen, while the mission clock is ticking, grabbing a cup of coffee, talking about what you might do, worrying it might not be perfect, worrying about everything that might happen, you're dead. Because the enemy is on the move. We've effectively gone from large, organized, standing armies to small, separated teams. Like the Allies after the D-Day landing, when years of planning dissolved in hours. None of the plans worked. None of them. Okay? Getting on the beach worked, I guess, for most. Not as many as they wanted, right? Years of planning dissolved in a few hours. Units were scattered and lost in the dark. Nobody knew where anybody was. Nobody had a plan. What do? Well, you look to the man on your left, man on your right, and then you start trying to find out if anybody else is out there. You're not very picky. I mean, the main requirement is they're not trying to kill you, I guess. In the words of someone, if they're not against us, they're for us. It doesn't matter what unit they were originally assigned to. It doesn't matter what their original objectives were. Things have changed. You need to quickly find them and include their abilities and their knowledge in your attempt to figure out what the heck the clear and simple next thing you're going to do is, using every resource at your disposal. And then you need to quickly act together to do that thing. Then you need to repeat that while still trying to find somebody else out there in the dark who isn't trying to kill you. There is no choice now but for us to find new configurations of personnel that were not in our plans. There is no choice. We are not going to win this battle with only the people who happen to be next to us. It's not going to happen. We must interrogate the requirements that we place on others before we will deign to work with them. Notice I didn't say before we will be in full Eucharistic communion with them, but before we will deign to work with them. Now is the time for the eye to to remember it has need of the hand. I had a shattered this wrist. Can you see the scar? I shattered this wrist 3 months ago. I don't know if my eye realized. Do you know you actually can't, your visual perception is actually structured according to things that you can grasp? And when you lose the ability to use your dominant hand, it actually affects your vision. Interesting. I experienced that. You just can't, you're not quite, it's hard to explain, but it's real. You know, you're not looking at things the same way if you're using your non-dominant hand. You actually can't see without grasping. Your eye actually does need your hand, okay? It wasn't just a metaphor. So this is something really interesting. Bishop Altar is going through talking about the incarnation, right? And everybody mentioned the pairing of truth and love, at least once. Everybody did. The way forward that provides an antidote to the poisonous Gnostic cocktail of lies and hatred is an embodiment of those two simple things: truth and love. Truth is aligning with the order of being instead of going to war with it. Love is aligning with each other instead of going to war with each other. That's the key to the tapestry of decisions that makes a world that is a living hell or a world that is the new kingdom. Right? It's those decisions. Are we acting in truth and love, or are we acting from lies and hatred? It sounds simple, but believe me, the math behind this is really complicated, okay? But we're like chihuahuas, right? We don't understand the math. We just got to do what we're told here. The way forward is perfectly positioned as an exodus from the Gnostic Empire, precisely because it calls delusion back to reality and hatred back to love. We will lead a new exodus. Won't we? From the Gnostic Empire, under the command of the Logos, who is both truth and love himself. What we do not know, he does know. What we don't control, he does control. He has become a human and the head of all things for us, his assembly. He is exerting impossibly intricate mathematics and stupendous dynamism to perfect in us a new pattern of doing things, absolutely unique in the history of the cosmos. He is once again going to flood the emptiness of every dark Gnostic delusion with his pure, unassailable light. He will bring the blessing of Abraham to order societies in his truth and his love, so that all the good things can run wild again. But right now, the delusions of Gnosticism are rotting people's bodies and their souls. To quote St. Patrick's breastplate, every knowledge that corrupts one's bodies and souls is gnosis, right? He knew. It was right after the craft of idolatry and the spells of witches and smiths and wizards, right? He understood that Gnosticism was magic, and that it was dark magic. That's what we're fighting here. It's demonic. I know you all know that, but I just get that on the table. It's demonic. You know that. The hatred of Gnosticism is shattering individuals, their bodies, their families, their societies, their nations. It is opening yet another portal to hell on earth that is going to be the only world that today's children will ever know. We're only a century in this, folks. The death toll is at about 170 million right now. And the wounded is billions. Somebody needs to speak for these people. You all got into this for different reasons. We've all come to the same place. So now I'm asking more of you than I have before. Maybe all. Because sure as I know anything, I know this, they are trying again. They have swung back around to the belief that they can change reality and change human nature itself. And I do not hold to that. So no more running. I aim to misbehave.